what we'll go through first is chapter 5, so government's role and government's failure. This won't be on the test. The test will only be chapters 1 to 3. So we're going to go through how the government's power to coerce can be economically beneficial, and there's a lot of difficulties with managing and directing the government. And then we're going to go through government failure and explain why it happens. So government can coerce through involuntary transactions. So this can be done through so one of the things that the government can do is reject a merger. So the government rejected the merger of BMO and RBC because it would become too big of a bank, and they would be able to charge consumers as much as they want. So this would be anti-competitive. So the government can block mergers from taking place due to anti-competition. That's something they can do here. And the problem with directing and managing government, there's no invisible hand. So the government can do whatever they want. There's no invisible hand guiding them. There's a massive size and scope of the government, the need for bureaucracy, the need for paperwork and flexibility, the information aggregation problem, and lack of accountability. So there's not a lot of accountability. So the government can do a lot of things and not face a check and balance. So they could make decisions and not face they won't face a lot of stakes. So like there's no cost to them because it's not their money, and they're elected for usually 4-year terms where they can just do whatever they want with taxpayer money, basically. So there's a lack of accountability because like they need to face voters every 4 years, and they're in their job until they have an election. So the only accountability they have really is through elections, mostly. So they could be voted out, but they basically have 4 years until they're voted out. So they could be doing a lot of bad things until they get voted out. So government failure is inefficient outcomes caused by shortcomings in the public sector. So the politicians can put their own interests ahead of voter interests, which happens, and then put the interests of a minority of voters ahead of those of a majority of voters. So that happens with focusing on certain groups, like let's say unions, let's say education workers, different types of associations. They may, the wealthy, they may be focusing on certain groups more than other groups, and the interests of those groups would be put over other interests. Then principal agent problem is when the interests of agents can differ from those of a principal. So an agent would be a politician. So the government would, so in this case, agent would be the government. Principal would be citizens. So the government agent may act against the best wishes of the citizens' principal. So this happens a lot, based on the interests of the government first. So the agents, so the agents' interests can potentially be put ahead of the principal's interests. This is an issue because the voters, because the citizens won't get what they need, basically. So that does happen. And then, so special interest effects. So small group obtains large gains at the expense of a much larger group who individually suffer small losses. So in this case, so like wealthy people, like the richest 1% of incomes, they may generate they generate almost all of the wealth, and the lowest 99% of wealth of incomes will generate much less. A good question. That's a good question, Christopher. So it is it's principal agent. So principal is like a is basically a person, and then principal like that is like a regulation or law or term, let's say. That's the difference. Good question. Good question. So government failure, there's clear benefits, hidden costs, unfunded liabilities, and chronic budget deficits, so economic efficiency, inefficiency, debt crises. So fiscal policy, they can use changes in tax rates and spending levels to offset the business cycle. Monetary policy, they can use changes in interest rates to regulate the economy. So they're doing that right now. So the Canadian government is raising interest rates to bring inflation down through reducing the money supply. And then inefficient regulation and intervention. So deregulation is used as an alternative. So this is done for when they like in certain industries, deregulation can be good in some cases, to an extent. So you want to balance regulation with deregulation. The problem with complete deregulation is that you get companies like Enron, which create which do extraordinarily unethical actions, such as shutting down California's power supply to drive up energy prices. So you need regulation. The regulation is required to stop these types of things from happening. So Enron did that. They actually shut down California's power supply, and this caused a shortage, thereby increasing prices through the roof. And they made a lot of money doing that. So you need regulation to prevent those types of things from happening. So you need a balance between deregulation and regulation. Too much regulation can be an issue. So like too much regulation can stop all business basically, because there are too many things to follow and everything is restricted. So you need a balance. You need a balance between regulation and deregulation. So then political corruption is the unlawful misdirection of government resources or actions for personal gain. So this is through bribery and demanding a bribe. The Sierra Leone is the place that has the highest amount of bribery in the world, followed by Kenya and then Uganda, and then other countries come after. So bribery isn't good for the economy. It's good to have lower rates of bribery because too much bribery can be a real issue to an economy. You need to have very little bribery in order for an economy to operate well. And then, so for institutions, the markets and government are both imperfect. So some it's hard to figure out where to focus like some goods and services. It's hard to determine um, where it should be produced, if it should be produced in public sector or private sector. So, but for certain things like roads, let's say, for example, they are produced, a lot are produced by the public sector because everyone needs roads to drive. And then like toll roads, like the 407, are produced by the private sector because they are luxury roads. They are not needed, but they reduce time to drive. So, so another thing here, Singapore has the best healthcare system in the world, in quality. They have the lowest rate of infant mortality and the world's fourth highest life expectancy. They spend less per person in healthcare than any other developed nation. This works because Singapore's healthcare system encourages competition. However, there's a lot of high out-pocket costs, which is a problem. Like compared to Canada, like we have a publicly funded healthcare system, so there's no out-of-pocket costs for most of us. But in Singapore, they have high out costs, so they have to pay out of their own pocket, which is a bad thing for that. But they have high quality of care, but they have to pay high prices for it out of their own pocket. We have like it varies in our quality of care. We don't have to pay out of pocket. So which one, I'll ask the class here, which one would you prefer? Would you prefer paying out of pocket for high quality healthcare, or would you prefer paying no out of pocket for varying healthcare? I'll write that down. So would you prefer high quality healthcare with high out of pocket expense? So public choice theory is the economic analysis of government decision-making, politics, and elections. So majority voting systems, it's difficult to correctly discern voter preferences, hinders the ability for government to deliver what the voters want. So then so majority voting provides preferences. The results can be inconsistent and imperfect. So ideally, the vote, so to be efficient, vote should provide benefits greater than total costs, and total costs. So like the efficient vote should provide total benefits greater than total costs. And then also in this case, those who have a strong preference for public good may band together. So people like, for example, education workers, they have incredibly effective unions. Like I would say their negotiation skills are the best I know of. So what they do is they band together. They so they push to get the best wages for teachers and negotiate through through meeting with the Ministry of Education. Also, they strike. Like striking is a good negotiation position because once you like once um once the once you're not given something, like once you don't have something, you see the true value of it. So like once education workers strike, the public sees that they need education workers, then then the government gives education workers a raise so they come back to work. So like nurses do this too. Nurses do this because a world without nurses through striking will create desperation, basically, in the government, in public, and they will be forced to give nurses a raise. This is what happens. Striking is an amazing bargaining position. Like if you know you're needed by the public or government, like if you know you're so important to them working, if you strike, they're gonna be like, wow, we need you back. So we're gonna pay you, let's say, a 10% raise. Like you just have to figure out if you're like you determine if your group of workers is really necessary to the operation. Like if you're the heart of something, like if you're the heart of a business or like any sort of agency, and without you and your group, uh, if they if they don't if they're not able to function without you, you can potentially strike and just be like, yeah, um, yeah, I require a raise, and I know that this company doesn't work, um, doesn't function without me, and I deserve more money. And if I strike, it's going to basically be shut down. So you got to pay me what I deserve, or the company's not going to work. So that's an incredible bargaining position, striking, and education workers do that very well. Nurses and many other professions in those cases. So this is a model that Adams, Conrad, and Benson use. So when it comes to national defense versus road, people usually pick national defense. And then when it comes to road versus weather warning system, people usually pick roads to focus on. And then if it comes to national defense versus weather warning system, people would pick weather warning system over national defense, just based on their model. But it's this changes every election cycle. So these types of so these issues change each election. So like certain elections have a certain issue focus. So it just depends on the election. So this changes all the time. Demanded per unit per percentage change in price. So to calculate elasticity of demands, it's percentage change in quantity demanded of product X divided by percentage change in the price of product X. So when quantity demanded responds strongly to change in price, demand is elastic. When quantity demanded responds weakly to change in price, demand is inelastic. So these are more for needs. So needs are inelastic. And then wants are more elastic demand. So what we have to do to calculate it is we have to use the midpoint method. So in this case, 4 would go here, 5 would go here, and then you take the difference between 4 and 5, which is 1, and you put it there. So this would be the change. So from 4 to 5, and then 4 would go here, and then 5 would go here. And then you get 22%. Give me 1 second. So in this case, to calculate this, what you'd have to do is, so you put in 20 here, 10 here, then you take the difference between 20 and 10, and then here you take the difference between 4 and 5, put 4 here, and then 5 here. So then, yeah, so like difference between 4 and 5 is 1, and then 4, so the average between 4 and 5, you do this, and then the difference between 20 and 10 is 10, and you take the average of 20 and 10, and then you get 0.33. So this is inelastic. So it's less than 1, so inelastic. So it's a need. So we use percentages because it's unit free, there's no units, and it shows responsiveness across products. So elasticity of demand will always be negative because price and quantity are inversely related. So as price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. So if we just put it in positive number, elasticity of demand greater than 1, demand is elastic, so it's a want here. And then elasticity of demand is 1, demand is unit elastic, so that means that revenue is maximized. And then elasticity of demand is less than 1, demand is inelastic, that's need. So these are the classifications here. Then perfectly inelastic is when the price changes completely. Like the price changes infinitely when quantity. Wait, no, sorry. The quantity demanded doesn't change when price changes. And then perfectly elastic, the price doesn't change when quantity demanded changes. So in this case, perfectly inelastic is this. So this is when quantity demanded stays the same. So this is when quantity demanded stays the same for any price. That's perfectly inelastic. And then perfectly elastic is when the quantity demanded changes. So price stays the same across any quantity demanded and perfectly elastic. So in this case, so what happens is I'll show you what happens. So revenue is maximized when it's unelastic. So revenue is maximized when it is unelastic. So in this case, price of 4.5 is when revenue is maximized at $18,000. So like if you want to use this as a business owner, make sure that you set price when you set price equal to when the demand is unit elastic to maximize revenue. So price elasticity along a linear demand curve. So for all straight lines, most other demand curves, demand is more elastic towards the top upper left. Demand is less elastic towards the lower right. So you want to be in the middle. You want to be in the middle where it's unit elastic. So in this case, revenue is maximized when it's unit elastic. So revenue is maximized at $20,000 when it's unit elastic. So you want to be here. This is where you want to be for to maximize sales. This is where you maximize sales. So in this case, this shows like, so in the middle here, when it's unit elastic, quantity demanded changes by the same percentage as does price. Total revenue is unchanged. Total revenue is unchanged. So this is where revenue is maximized. Revenue is maximized here. So you want to get in the middle. You want to get where it's unit elastic. Substitutability. So the larger number of substitute goods available, the greater the price elasticity of demand. So, so like, can you think of any industry where there's a lot of substitute goods for a product? Yeah, that's good. Yeah, exactly. So, the phone industry has has elastic demand because there are so many substitutes. So like, for example, Apple, Samsung, Nokia, BlackBerry, oh, LG, Google, and many more. So there's so many. So that's a great example, Christopher. And then yeah, so that's a big part of it. Yeah. And then luxury versus necessity. The more a good is considered as a luxury rather than a necessity, the greater the price elasticity of demand. So easier to do without. So can you think of a luxury good that you don't need that much? Yeah, that's a perfect example. That's great, Rusty. Excellent. So yeah, an expensive car has elastic demand because we don't need it. If the price um, goes up, uh, the quantity demanded will reduce by a significant amount because we don't need it, because no one needs an expensive car. But that's so it's elastic. So like also like in recessions, in a recession, uh people will buy less luxury goods because they don't need them. Therefore, they have elastic. So in this case, these goods here, so these goods listed here, these all have inelastic demand. The reason why is because so these goods have an inelastic demand because if the price goes up, quantity demanded doesn't change, doesn't go down that much. People still buy them. So like newspapers, so they mean news like digital news now. So like New York Times online, let's say, people if the price goes up, people will still buy it because they need it. Electricity, people need electricity, so they'll still buy electricity if it goes up. People need bread to eat, they'll still buy bread if it goes up in price. Major League Baseball tickets, big fans of the Blue Jays, like season ticket holders. Even if the price of the tickets go up, they'll still buy them because they'll always love baseball. And then telephone service, people need telephones to talk to other people. So if the price goes up for telephone service, they will still pay it. So like all these other things, similar stories here. And then over here, so these are elastic demand. So elastic demand. So people will buy will reduce their quantity demanded a lot for a price increase of these things. So like for restaurant meals, like if the price of restaurant meals goes up, people will just eat at home basically. If the price of lamb and mutton go up, people will just eat cheaper meats, let's say. If the price of beef goes up, people will just shift to buying cheaper meats, let's say. And then motor vehicles also, like people, if the price goes up for motor vehicles, people will just buy a lot less motor vehicles. So then sales taxes. So sales taxes, so higher tax on a product with elastic demand will bring in less tax revenue. The reason why is because people will reduce buying the product by a significant. And then legislatures seek out products with inelastic demand, such as liquor, gasoline, cigarettes, when levying sales tax because people will still buy these products when they because people will still buy these products even if the price goes up. Yeah. Price elasticity of supply is a percentage change in quantity supplied of product X for every percentage change in price of product X. So in this case, so so antiques antiques have inelastic supply because they because there won't be more produced. They are rare and the price is high because you cannot make more antiques. So in this case, cross price elasticity um, of demand. It's percentage change of quantity demanded of product X is about a big percentage change in the price of product Y. Substitute goods would have positive signs, so like substitutes such as Coke and Pepsi. So like Coke and Pepsi, and then complementary goods would have negative signs, so ketchup, mustard, and then independent goods near zero, so like let's say cars and baby bottles. So those are like they're not related at all. They're independent. So So I have a question here. So applications of price elasticity. Coca-Cola versus Sprite. Will a price cut in Sprite increase or decrease total revenue? Uh, Good tries. So it will increase total revenue. The reason why, because Coca-Cola and Sprite are complements. They are bought frequently together, and they are made by the same company. Therefore, if the price of Sprite goes down, people will buy more Sprite because it's cheaper. And since Sprite and Coca-Cola are bought together, people will then also buy more Coca-Cola. Yeah, good job, Wesley. Great job. Great, excellent, everybody. Great job. So then, so Coke and Pepsi are strong substitutes. So, since they're strong substitutes and they have large market shares, they could never merge together. So Coke and Pepsi would never merge. Like Coca-Cola and Pepsi would never become the same company because this would cause monopoly. And the problem with this is like Coca-Cola and Pepsi could never merge together because because they would create a monopoly and the company would have the power to raise prices too high. They're because they are the only supplier of soda for the most part. So they can name the price and maximize profits. The government would never allow this because the government prevents companies from becoming monopolies. Yeah. So income elasticity of demands. We'll go through this. So the income elasticity of demand is percentage change in quantity demanded of product X per percentage change in income. So normal goods would have a positive sign. So there would be so people buy more. In this case, people buy more normal goods when they have higher income. And then people buy more inferior goods when they have lower income. So then high income elasticities, people with relatively high income elasticity coefficients are hit hardest by recessions. So automobile industries, housing, restaurant meals are hit hardest by recessions. And you saw that with COVID-19, the restaurant industry, they took a lot of restaurants went out of business because of COVID-19. Housing, the amount of houses sold has reduced significantly. They anticipate 25% housing sales reduction in 2023. So there will be a quarter like there will be 25% less houses sold in 2023 based on forecasts. And then lower negative income elasticities are least affected by recession. So toothpaste and food products purchased at home. So these industries right here. So these industries right here. So like these are inferior goods. Like, can you name any inferior goods you can think of? Like products that you would buy more of in of when your income goes down. Can you think of any products like that? Sure, no problem, Brian. Thanks for showing up, Brian. I appreciate you coming in. That's great. Um, yeah, don't worry. Thanks for coming in. Um, so eggs, instant ramen, food that can be preserved and is cheaper like canned food. Those are great examples. Yeah, those are good. Frozen microwavable dishes, all great examples. So yeah, those examples, great examples, everybody. So so those are what you call recession-proof companies. Like if you invest in the companies, so invest in these companies that provide inferior goods. So like how the market works, make an account, and invest in companies that produce inferior goods. Because inferior goods will be needed, because inferior goods are needed in recessions and non-recessions. They are always needed. So like they're good investments because they're always needed. So I highly recommend find on how the market works, find companies that you can invest in that that produce inferior goods. Yeah. So like the ones you listed in the chat, those types of goods, yeah. So cross price elasticity, the positive, that's a substitute. Then cross price elasticity negative, that's complement. Then income elasticity, that's positive, that's a normal good. And then negative income elasticity, it's an inferior good. So harmonized sales taxes in Ontario, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Labrador. HST varies across provinces. HST extends provincial taxing services. So in this case, so like if the price elasticity of demand and supply, so like in this case, if the price elasticity of demand and supply are the same, a tax is shared equally across consumers and producers. And in this case, if the price elasticity of demand is greater than the price elasticity of supply, the producer pays more of the tax. And then if the price elasticity of supply is greater than the price elasticity of demand, the consumer pays more of the tax. So like basically the more inelastic you are, the more tax you pay. If consumers have more inelastic demand, they pay more tax. If producers have more inelastic demands, they pay more tax. basically. Just keep that up for a bit. So efficiency loss is tax. So tax revenues are produced from a tax. There are efficiency losses due to tax because there's underproduction. So good question on that. So good question. So like inelastic demands is like if you are if it is inelastic, that means like that you need something. So like if you're if you need something more than someone else, you will likely pay a higher price for it. Therefore, they allocate the tax towards you because you will always pay for it, regardless of the price. So so if um, if the consumer has a more inelastic need for something, they will pay more of the tax. Exactly, yeah. So it shifts, so the tax burden shifts to who needs it more. That's great. And who needs it more has the more inelastic demand slash supply. That you got it, Justin. That's great. That's exactly it. And then a good thing to remember with so like the more flatter the curve slash graph, the more elastic. And then also the more steeper the curve slash graph, the more inelastic. Yeah. So that's a good motto. So remember that. That's good visually for that. Yeah. So I'll just keep this up too. So in this case, the tax produces deadweight loss. The triangle there is deadweight loss, and that's caused by underproduction. So the tax causes underproduction, and you don't produce as much as efficiently possible. So that causes efficiency loss. So here, this is another good example of it. So like elasticity and pricing power. Why do different consumers pay different prices? So firms and nonprofit institutions often recognize and exploit differences in price elasticity of demand. So differences in price elasticities of demand are often exploited by suppliers. So price airlines charge business versus leisure travelers. So like business class, business class is charged more because because they need it more due to the money generated from business. Yeah. And then charges for children versus adults at hairstylists or ski resorts, etc. So adults are charged more because they have a higher willingness to pay than children because they have income. They have they have substantial income. And then colleges and universities that offer financial aid to low income students. So high income students don't get financial aid because they don't need it. Um, most usually, low income students get financial aid because they need it. Usually, what we'll do is I'm going to show a video on price elasticity of demand. Put it on.
We are now going to discuss price elasticity of demand, which sounds like a very fancy concept, but really it's a way for economists to sense how sensitive is quantity to change in prices. And in this video, we're going to denote it as a capital E, so price elasticity of demand. And the easy way to think about it is your percent change in, I'll use the Greek letter delta as shorthand for change in, your percent change in quantity over your percent change in price. And so you might say, wait, how does this relate to the everyday idea of elasticity? Well, imagine two bands. So let's imagine an inelastic band, inelastic, right over here, and let's imagine an elastic band right over here. So in an inelastic band, if we apply some amount of force, you're not going to be able to stretch it much. It might stretch a little bit. While in an elastic band, if you apply that same amount of force, you might be able to stretch it a lot more. And so the analogy here is we're not using force, but we're saying how much does quantity stretch for a given amount of price change. And so something where the quantity changes a lot for a given price change would be very elastic. So the magnitude of this will be larger. And if the percent change in quantity doesn't change a lot for a given percent change in price, well, then we're dealing with an inelastic price elasticity of demand. And we'll be able to internalize these more as we work through the numbers. And actually, let's do that for this demand schedule that we have right over here, and it's visualized as our demand curve. In the vertical axis, we have price of burgers, and then in our horizontal axis, we have quantity in terms of burgers per hour. And so let's just use this definition of price elasticity of demand to calculate it across different points on our demand curve. So let me make a new column here. So price elasticity of demand. And the way I'm going to do it is really the simplest method for calculating this. In other videos, we can go into more in-depth methods like the midpoint method. And I'll show you the weakness in what we're doing right here. But for the sake of, say, an AP Economics, Microeconomics course, this would be sufficient. So let's think about our price elasticity of demand as we go from point A to point B. Well, remember, that's just going to be our percent change in quantity over our percent change in price. So what is our percent change in quantity? Well, we're starting at a quantity of 2. So I'll put that in our denominator. And we're going from 2 to 4. So we are adding 2. So we have 2 over 2. We could multiply that times 100% if we like. So this would give us, we have 100% change in quantity over, now what was the corresponding change in price? Percent change in price. So our corresponding percent change in price, our initial price is 9. And we go from 9 to 8. So we're going down by 1. And then we multiply that times 100%. So this is going to be about a negative 11% change in price. And this math is reasonably straightforward because the 100% cancel out. This is just a 1. 1 over negative 1/9 is just going to be equal to negative 9. So you have a negative 9 price elasticity of demand. So before I interpret that more, let's look at the price elasticity of demand at other points, or starting from other points to other points on this curve. So let's think about it going from, let's think about it going from E to F. So as we go from E to F, we're going to do the same exact exercise. What is our percent change in quantity? Well, our initial quantity is 16, and we're going from 16 to 18. So we have a change of 2. So 2 over 16 times 100%, that is our percent change in quantity. And what is our percent change in price? Well, our initial price is 2, and we're going from 2 to 1. So we have a price change of -1 times 100%. And so what you see here is this is 1/8 times 100%. This would be 12.5% up here. So this is 12.5% up there. And then this over here is going to be -50%. So when price went down by 50%, you had a 12.5% increase in quantity. 12.5% is 1/4 of 50%. So this is going to give us a price elasticity of demand of -0.25. So there's a couple of interesting things that you might already be realizing. One is, even though our demand curve right over here is a line, it actually has a constant slope. You see that the price elasticity of demand changes depending on different parts of the curve. Now, the reason why this is really just boils down to math. When we were going from A to B, our initial prices were relatively high. So even though you had a price decrease of 1, it was from an initial price of 9. So your percentage change in price looked fairly low, while your percentage change in quantity was high because you're going from a low quantity of 2 and you're adding 2 to it. So you had 100% change in quantity. When you go to the other end of our curve and you go from E to F, it's the other way around. Your price starting point is low. So your percent change in price, when you decrease price by 1, it looks like a fairly large magnitude, while your percent change in quantity when you go from E to F, because you are already at a quantity of 16, adding 2 to that is not that large of a percentage. Now, another thing you might be appreciating is if we tried to calculate the price elasticity of demand up here on the curve, and instead of going from A to B, if we went from B to A, we would have gotten a different value because our initial prices and quantities would have been different. Our initial price, we would have put an 8 right over here, and our initial quantity, we would have put a 4 over here, and we would have gotten a different value. And that's one of the negatives of the technique, which is arguably the simplest technique that I just used. There's other techniques like the midpoint technique that can give you a more consistent result whether you're going from A to B or B to A, but I won't cover it just yet. But let's think now about how to interpret this. And the best way to interpret it is to think about the absolute value of the price elasticity of demand. So over here, the absolute value of our price elasticity of demand is equal to 9. And then over here, the absolute value of our price elasticity of demand is equal to 0.25. And a general rule of thumb is if your absolute value of your price elasticity of demand is less than 1, you are dealing with an inelastic situation. And if your price elasticity of demand, the absolute value of it, is greater than 1, you're dealing with an elastic situation. Why does that make sense? Well, in this first scenario, it's saying for a given percentage change in price, you have a smaller percent change in quantity. While here, for a given percent in price, you're going to have a larger than that percentage change in your quantity. So once again, it goes back to these rubber band analogies. So when we're going from A to B, the absolute value of our price elasticity of demand is definitely larger than 1. So economists would consider this to be an elastic situation. While when we go from point E to point F, our price elasticity of demand, or the absolute value of it, is definitely less than 1. So this is going to be an inelastic situation.
Khan Academy does excellent videos on a lot of economic concepts. So I want to I'm glad I showed you that video. So the next thing we'll do, I'm just gonna bring it up here. Sharing the screen. try this. So let's try this. So for fighting inflation, what would you do to fight inflation in this case? Like which green tiles would you put under fight inflation? Raise taxes is good. You're spending, all good options. What else? So fight inflation, you can decrease deficit. Fight unemployment, you can excellent. Fight unemployment, you can lower taxes, increase transfer payments, increase deficit, and increase spending. So expansionary monetary policy increases investment consumption. Expansionary fiscal policy increases government purchasing consumption. Both put people back to work and fight unemployment. Contractionary policies do the opposite and reduce GDP to slow down the economy. So that's great. Great job, everybody. So we'll do this activity here. I'm just going to start it here. So I will supply the link in a second. I'll click on this link if you want to join. So I'll give everyone like 2 minutes to go, like to start. Whoever hasn't come in, but if you haven't gotten in, you have you can join in anytime during the class. Great work, Westy, Justin, Nikki, awesome, Christopher, Trisha, Brian, Yan Feng, Tom, awesome work. Great competition, everybody. This is awesome. great work, everybody. That's great. I think Wasi got perfect. Justin got perfect too. I think Nikki did great. Christopher did great. Trish did great. Brian, Yanfeng, Tom all did great. Excellent work, everybody. Great work. So first place was Wasi. Justin was second. Nikki was third. Awesome work, everybody. Great job. Yeah, excellent game. That was excellent. So what we'll do is the next thing we'll do is let's split. I'll split the class into two different groups. So like let's do two different groups. So let's say the first group is let's just do auto slides. So the first group, the first group from, it'll be A to B. No, sorry, A to J. So A to J, Spinosaurus, and then the rest, so K to Z, will be pumpkin. So what does elasticity measure? So I'll give that to you. I'll give that to your group. It's great. Great job. The list of items below elastic or inelastic: toothpaste, bottled water, Crest toothpaste, diamond bracelets, Windows operating system, ketchup. So yeah, I'll give it to you. I should have. I'll give it. So I'll give it to yeah, because and then I'll give both teams some points for that. Great job. Yeah, I should have specified that it was some were elastic, some were inelastic. So what are the major determinants of price elasticity of demand? Name at least two. Yeah, I'll give you both a point for that. That's great. Great job. Substitutability, portion of income, luxury, necessities, time. That's great. If price falls and demand is unit elasticity, how does this impact total revenue? No change. So yeah, it's maximized at this point. So there's no change. So unit elastic in that case. Unit elastic maximize revenue. No change. What does the negative coefficient of elasticity tell us about the elasticity? Christopher, inelastic. So I'll give you, so good job on that, that's great. And what is the midpoint formula? Great job, OC. Is the market demand rather elastic or inelastic for luxury goods? Great job, everybody. So I'll give $200. So 200. Is the market demand elastic or inelastic for luxury goods? I think we already answered that. How does the total revenue test determine elasticity? So if price increases until revenue increases, then the product is inelastic. But if price decreases until revenue increases, the product is elastic. What is the definition of perfectly inelastic demand? Include the slope of the line. I'll give everyone a point for that. That's great. Great answers, everybody. What is the price of elasticity demand formula? Yeah, that's great. Good job. Research indicates that the cross elasticity of beer and cigarettes are negative. Are they substitute or complementary products? Yeah, great job, everybody. I'll give everyone a point for that one. As the number of the substance increase, will the demand be more elastic or inelastic, or why? And why? Yes, everyone. Great job, everybody. I'll give every team a point for that one. Does this total revenue graph indicate elasticity or inelasticity? Velocity. So, velocity, you got that. The fact that the expenditure on food as a percentage of income has declined as income has increased indicates that food is it elastic and elastic. Very good. Sorry, I didn't phrase that one correctly. Sorry for that. So Mark sells lemonade at a price of $2 per cup. He sells 100 at a price of $1.5 each. He sells 300. What is the elasticity of demand? So calculate that with the formula. So that would be change in quantity divided by average quantity divided by change in price divided by average price. So it'll be 3.5. So change in quantity be 200, and then you find the average of quantity. Then change in price would be 0.5, and you find the average price. If a municipality passed a rule stating that residents must buy parking passes for the residential garage, would parking passes be elastic or inelastic? Great job, everybody. I'll give everyone a point for that one. Would a higher proportion of income lead to more elastic demand or inelastic demand, and why? Yeah, great job, everybody. I'll give everyone a point for that one. Within each color block, yellow, green, gray, does the graph indicate elastic or inelastic demand? So it depends on the region. So it'll be different in each one. So think about, is it elastic or inelastic in yellow? Is it elastic or inelastic in green, or unelastic? And is it unelastic, elastic, inelastic in gray? So yellow is elastic, green is unelastic, and gray is inelastic. So that's okay. So why do we use the midpoint formula opposed to the elasticity formula? This is a tough one. You can use Google to search for it. It's a tough question. You can do research on the side to figure it out. So yeah, great job, Christopher. I'll give you that point. So 500. So Spinosaurus is now in the lead now by 100. Jeff sells bagels at a price of $1.5 each, sells 250. At a price of $1 each, he sells 300. So use the formula change in quantity divided by average quantity divided by change in price divided by average price. So I'll give you a few extra seconds. So to do this one, you do 300 minus 250 divided by 300 plus 250 divided by 2 divided by 1 minus 1.5 divided by 1 plus 1.5 divided by 2. It's inelastic. How does the factor time affect the elasticity of demand? Would the demand be more elastic or inelastic as the one has more time shopping? So more time equals more elastic. So a Christmas shopper on Christmas Eve has an elastic demand since there's less time for alternative purposes. How would the following changes in price affect total revenue? Increase, decrease, unchanged. Price falls and demand is elastic. Price rises and demand is elastic. Wasi, it was after the buzzer. The countdown was over. Sorry about that. Okay, so for this, decrease, decrease. I think Christopher got that in after. So this is more. Okay, so great job, everybody. Spider